Hello and welcome to Retro Reviews, my channel where I review my favorite retro video games of all time, as well as some modern releases I have recently finished. Today I want to go back to the PlayStation 3 era of games, get back into the retro category that's just barely retro at this point, and I want to talk about Dark Souls. Now, I previously talked about Demon Souls on this channel. I'm actually going to be doing the entire Souls series. I'll probably try and stagger it so I get through the series pretty quickly at this point, because now I've actually played every single one of the Soulsborne games, including Sekiro, if you don't count that as a Soulsborne, from Software's catalog, and I want to review each and every single one. I remember giving Demon Souls a gold rank and said that it was a wonderful precursor to Dark Souls in the Dark Souls series, and as a great starting point for people that want to jump into the Souls series. And Dark Souls is the natural next step, and this was the next game in From Software's catalog. This is where they really broke into the mainstream in a major way. Part of that having to do with them doing cross-platform, launching on Microsoft's Xbox 360 as well, but also just making the formula a little more mainstream and a little easier to access when you're first starting out the game. So Dark Souls is a spectacular title. It took everything that Demon Souls did well and it iterated on it in a fantastic way. From the get-go, you are put into this situation. You have to figure out this starting area. You have very little equipment. Everything can pretty much kill you, but you're taught the mechanics in a pretty seamless way. I think the opening dungeon is a spectacular opening level for something as brutal as Dark Souls. It's an area that can teach you the mechanics of the game while also posing a significant threat to the player. I was able to get through the first area without dying a single time. In fact, even taking down the first boss, my very first go around. And I felt really powerful and cool getting through that first area on my first go around. And that's what I love about this. You're posed with this really huge hulking beast at the very beginning of the game. But if you're smart about it and you can figure out your surroundings, I decided to run. And I found a doorway that I could go through. I didn't have a good weapon. I think you just start off with your broken sword. Or maybe I had something else at that point. But I did not have anything capable of taking down this monster. I was able to find this doorway. I went up some stairs. I fought some guys. I found a better weapon. And then I got a vantage point where I could jump in and plunge into the first boss and take him down. No problem. It was really rewarding for me. I remember that being one of my first introductions to the series. I'd played Bloodborne prior to this point. That was my very first game in the From Software's catalog. I hadn't beaten the game, but I played quite a bit of it and I really enjoyed it, and I felt like I could finally jump into the Souls series. I had played Demon Souls very first, but I didn't get very far. I think the first couple bosses, and then I stopped playing because I couldn't figure it out. I played a lot of Bloodborne, and then I went back and played Dark Souls. I actually got it on the Nintendo Switch because I figured I'd have the best opportunity to play that on the go, and it was actually a phenomenal experience. I'm sure it runs a little better on the PlayStation 4, especially with the remastered version. Or I know the original had some problems with Blighttown, but the remastered edition on the Switch runs exceptionally well. I had a really good time playing that. But I felt really fantastic beating this first area. And that's where this game really succeeds. It has a phenomenal tutorial area, and then probably the best hub area in like all of gaming. It's one of the very best. I know a lot of people point to Dark Souls 2 as having a phenomenal hub area, which I agree, but Firelink Shrine is something really special. You get to this point, you see this bonfire in the middle. It's this beautiful resting point. You have music there. It's one of the few places in the game where you have this background music, this comforting sound. It's really a special place. You have NPCs around you. You have lots of branching paths to go a lot of different ways. Firelink Shrine is something of this respite in this world that is full of death, that's full of danger, that's full of a lot of repetition. You're going to be dying, running back, trying to get your souls that you drop when you die, and dying again. You're probably going to bang your head against the wall in several places, and you're probably going to get frustrated, and that's great. This game is built on you overcoming frustration and overcoming something that's really hard roadblock in front of you. The more that you persevere, the more that you learn about the game's mechanics, the easier time you're going to have. I think I touched on a lot of these ideas in Demon Souls, but like I said previously, this game really perfects those mechanics in a major way. By the time you get to the first major boss outside of the tutorial area, you are going to get hit over the head pretty hard if you don't know what you're doing. You'll find that the first few bosses are not going easy on you in any way. and you're limited in your space, you're limited in your resources. The more you explore, the more you'll find opportunities to take down these bosses. I think Dark Souls does an excellent job of this. If you look around prior to going into a boss area, you might find some item on some corpse that is a great way to combat the boss ahead of you. Just like in Demon Souls, finding some of the little fire items that you can throw were the perfect counter to the very first boss. You have similar mechanics here. And the more you explore and the more you take down enemies and gather souls and upgrade your character, the more fit you'll be to take down the boss. It doesn't make it a whole lot easier, but upgrading your character, upgrading your weaponry can really help in overcoming these obstacles that seem insurmountable at first. And the more you push on, the more you feel like you have what it takes to overcome, until you come up against another roadblock that's even harder. Sometimes you'll get to a boss that seems significantly harder than anything you faced up to that point, and you'll feel like there's no way you can overcome it. One of the biggest examples of this that you're probably thinking of if you've played the Dark Souls series, or if you're familiar with it at all, is Ornstein and Smough. They are a duo boss, probably the most infamous in Dark Souls lore overall. Terrifying double boss with tons of health, tons of damage. They have different attack patterns. One's fast, one's slower, but swings a lot harder. They have different stats and abilities. That boss is kind of the breaking point for so many people. That's the do or die time. That's the boss that you come up to and think, there's no way I'll never be able to surmount this challenge that I'm being presented with. And that's what Dark Souls does best. It prepares you. It helps you to learn and grow. It doesn't make anything easy for you, but as you overcome steps, you get more powerful and you feel like you can overcome something harder, and you start to get better at the game, start figuring out parrying and blocking and stamina management. You start taking down bosses easier than you did before, and then you're presented with something like a duo boss that can absolutely smoke you over and over and over again. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how much you've leveled up your weapon, it's all just down to your perseverance and being able to figure out how to beat this boss. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. I think that Ornstein and Smough being such a gatekeeper boss for this game is actually really cool. Not that it stops a lot of people from progressing. I wish a lot more people would be able to persevere through these games, but it is kind of a trial by fire. This is one of those moments where it's like you really need to figure out if you have what it takes. Because that's what your character would be thinking. If you are this chosen undead dying over and over and over again, would it be easy to keep banging your head against the wall, or would it be easier to give up? And that's the question that this game asks more often than not. Is it easier to give up or to keep pushing through? And I love that in this game. I actually remember watching a video on Dark Souls from the Act Man. It's one of my inspirations to actually pursue this channel and actually do my reviews on it. I loved what he had to say about it. I would recommend you go watching his video on this. I'm going to say a couple things that he said because I think they're just so poignant and brilliant. The whole point of this game is pushing on, because a lot of the characters, the NPCs that you interact with, talk about going hollow. That's what these enemies that you fight, they're hollowed enemies that used to be just like you. It used to be these humans or these undead that would push on and try and fight against the bosses of this game, or even just the lower enemies. And the ones that you encounter earliest are the people that gave up the soonest. And the further you get, the more that you get these people that made it a little bit further, or made it to this really hard boss and just couldn't hack it anymore. The whole point of these hollows is representative of the people that decided to give up, that couldn't make it past the first, the second, the third, the 15th boss, that couldn't quite keep going. They're representative of these players that couldn't do it. I think that's a beautiful thing. You're fighting against the very people that were doing the exact same thing you are. They just couldn't make it. They decided that they weren't going to push on anymore, and they lost their humanity and became hollow. They became the enemies of the game. So the only thing that separates you from the hollowed people is your perseverance, is how much you want to push on and succeed in this game. If you keep pushing, you keep persevering, and you plow through adversity, until you succeed, you will keep your humanity and you will stop yourself from going hollow. It's literally the only thing that keeps you sane and keeps you safe. I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that the themes in Dark Souls really nailed it on the head. I think they knocked it out of the park in that regard. The lore really evolved in Dark Souls in a major way. You get a lot of backstory on a lot of these enemies that you fight, a lot of the bosses that you fight. If you pick up items and weaponry, you can read descriptions on them to give you more insight into the lore of the world. And the more you read about them, the more you'll learn. But if you are not interested in the lore, you don't have to do it. I didn't read a whole lot of things, but I learned a lot from my friend who read a lot of the things. I learned a lot from people reviewing it, and that made me want to learn more about the items in future games or replaying Dark Souls. I started to read those item descriptions because it made the world more interesting. You can get more out of this game by just reading, and that's really cool. Or you can just really enjoy the combat and the challenge and go through it that way and still have a remarkable time. That's what I love about the Souls series in general. The enjoyment you get out of this game will be directly related to how much work you put into it. If you work on just the combat and the stellar mechanics of the game, you will find a very rewarding experience. But if you put in some more time and learn about the lore, you'll be rewarded even further because you'll learn more about these characters, more about why you should care about the world, more about why you should care about your character in general. I think Dark Souls is a spectacular game. It's a little bit older at this point. You can tell that some of the things don't age as well if you've played some of the newer games, like Elden Ring or Bloodborne. Even you can tell that some of the mechanics feel just a little bit older. But it's absolutely still worth going back. If you haven't played the Souls series, I recommend either starting with the Demon Souls remake on PS5 or Dark Souls Remastered, because both are fantastic entry points. I recommend the entire series, absolutely. And I'm going to give Dark Souls Remastered a platinum rank for sure. That's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.